When the power cuts and the world goes quiet, we tell ourselves there's nothing to fear. Just wind, just rain, just darkness. But blackouts have a way of peeling the night back, layer by layer, until you notice what's been standing outside your window, waiting. Tonight, 3 real stories from people who learned the worst rule the hard way. During a blackout, do not look. Story 1. The shape in 4B's window. I rent a small studio on the 4th floor of a 1960s building, thin walls, thin windows, thick shadows. In early summer, a storm rolled over the city and the power failed. The hall went dead. Elevators stalled. Even the exit signs quit. We were held by the rain and the dark. I lit a candle, then another, and settled on the windowsill, listening to water beating the alley below. Across from me, in the building opposite, every window was a black square, except for one, 4B. Curtains half drawn, a dim orange glow, like a candle, and behind it, a shape, not moving, just tall, just there. I told myself it was a coat rack, a plant, anything but a person. I checked my phone. The city alert said the grid was down for an hour. Fine, I could wait. But then the shape tilted, not like a person leaning, more like a hinge creaking in slow motion. I froze. My candle flickered. A gust pushed a strand of hair across my face, and I brushed it back. When I looked again, the shape had shifted closer to the glass. I could make out the line of a head, too narrow and shoulders too long. The rain softened, and I heard something else through the open apartment vents, tapping, a faint, polite tapping. I muted my phone. Tap, tap, tap. It wasn't at my door. I knew the acoustics in that place like I knew my heartbeat. The taps were coming through the alley, ricocheting across the brick. Someone was trying a window. At 4B, the curtain moved as if a hand pressed against it from the inside, dragging downward. I stood up, candle in hand, and before my brain could stop me, I raised a flame near the glass. In that moment, something in 4B noticed me. The shape turned, rotated and faced me fully. The orange glow swelled, not brighter but nearer, as if the light itself leaned forward. I backed away, heart hammering. I didn't want to look. I didn't want to be seen. But a sound cut through the alley that I swear had weight. The flutter of a window unlatching. Tap, tap, tap. Now the taps were on my side of the alley, on my level. I killed the candle. Darkness swallowed everything. For a breath, I saw the after image of 4B's curtain burned into my vision. And in that after image, something like long fingers curled around fabric. I slid to the floor, crawled to the kitchen, and grabbed the only weapon I had. A heavy frying pan. I waited. The taps grew exploratory, curious, like nails finding wood grain. They moved past my window, down a few feet, then back, testing. I remembered the fire escape. If someone could reach the lip and lever themselves up, the tap stopped. Nothing but rain and my rattling breath. A minute later, the power returned in a gasp. The building sighed, back to life. Humming refrigerators, click of lights, distant cheer from a TV. I stood dizzy with relief and dared a glance across the alley. 4B's curtain hung open. The room beyond was empty. No candle, no shape. But on the inside of the glass, 4 long streaks dulled the light. Marks like something had leaned there, watching me watch it. 2 days later, the superintendent sent an email. The tenant of 4B had reported someone trying their window during the blackout. They weren't home at the time. So, whose candle was I watching? Story 2. Dead air. I grew up in a farmhouse that used to be a relay station. Old wiring, a dead intercom system built into the walls. My mother said the intercom was from the 70s, disconnected long before I was born. The metal plates in every room were nothing but decoration. Last winter, an ice storm knocked out our power for nearly a day. Without heat, without internet, I camped in the living room, wrapped in a blanket, listening to the house tick as it settled. The storm kept our road empty. The snow swallowed sound. Around 1 a.m. I heard the living room intercom crackle, a whisper of static, like someone breathing into an old microphone. Then a voice cleared its throat. It wasn't exactly in the speaker, more like behind the wall, trying to remember how to be human. Testing, it said. My blood went cold. I sat upright, staring at the grey metal plate. It had no light, no power, no reason to work. Is anyone still there? The voice asked, like a worker late for a shift, embarrassed to find the place closed. I told myself it was radio interference, the storm carrying some trucker's call. Still, I whispered, "Hello?" It responded too fast. "Don't whisper. They hear whispers." I wanted to tear the plate off the wall, but I couldn't move. I asked, "Who's they?" The house answered with a settling creak that travelled from the attic to the basement like footsteps descending through wood. The voice returned, softer. "Do not look outside. I'm not brave, but fear has a way of making you do absurd things." I went to the window beside the door and lifted the edge of the curtain a finger's width. Beyond the porch, our fields were white, the tree line a black saw. At the fence, something stood, a person in heavy clothes, maybe a neighbor. But the figure was wrong in the way a recording is wrong. Just a fraction off from reality. It didn't shift its weight. It didn't steam in the cold. It was angled toward the house like it had been set down, placed. "I told you not to," the intercom said. "They stand there because they know you'll look." I dropped the curtain. My mouth tasted like pennies. "What do?" I whispered. This time silence stretched so long I felt abandoned. Then the voice said, "Count, aloud, from 1 to 15. I did. When I reached 15, the intercom clicked. "Good. Now do not look until the power returns." I waited 5 hours. The figure never knocked, never moved. But once, around 3 a.m., it leaned just a fraction toward the window, and I felt the cold press through the glass, as if something breathed in. I wanted to run to the barn, to the car, anywhere, but the voice had spoken to me from the dead air, and I believed it knew more about the night than I did. At sunrise, the power surged back. Heat coughed from the vents, and the house exhaled. I yanked the door open and stepped onto the porch. No footprints led to the fence. No footprints led away. Just 2 depressions where feet should have been deeper than any human could press into frozen ground. When I went back inside, the intercom crackled one last time. Next time, it said, "Don't answer." Then the metal plate went cold for good. Story 3. Stacks. I work evenings at a small town library. Our building is old, tall shelves packed tight, and upstairs mezzanine the kids call the whisper floor. During a summer thunderstorm, the power died mid-checkout. We guided patrons to the door with phone flashlights, locked up, and waited for the city to restore the grid. My co-worker Beth left. I stayed to reshelve returns by lantern. Long, quiet work. The rain was steady but gentle. Inside the library, it sounded like breathing. In the far aisle, I heard a book slide out, then slap the carpet. I sighed, light held high. People shove books back wrong all the time they slide. Except there was no one left but me. And gravity doesn't set books in the middle of the floor open to a specific page. This one had. The page was a black and white photo of the library in the 1930s. The same stacks, the same mezzanine. I could see a librarian at the desk, and behind her, in a second-floor window, a smudge, like the photographer's thumb had dragged across the negative. Someone had penciled a circle around it with a note. "Don't look too long." I didn't like that. Another book landed, then another, farther down the aisle, then behind me. The returns cart shivered as if a hand brushed past. I called out, "We're closed." Something answered in the only way a library can, a moving shadow where there should be none. The mezzanine railing, half visible in the lantern glow, showed the silhouette of someone leaning over to watch. The shape was long, wrong, like a person sketched by someone who had never seen a person up close. I backed toward the main desk. My lantern flickered, the rain paused, and the building's quiet grew thick enough to taste. "Beth," I said, knowing it wasn't. Even without power, the ancient microfilm reader hummed to life. The screen glowed a smear of white. Letters crawled out of the blur, like a message typed on a machine missing half its keys. "Do not look up." Have you ever tried not to look up when something in the room wants you to? My eyes burned to raise, to give in. The message updated, slow and jittering. "It stands above the door." I kept my gaze on the grainy white. My mouth formed the word "please" without sound. The reader flickered. "Count." I remembered a story about counting through fear. I whispered, 1, 2, 3. On 5, the mezzanine creaked. On 8, the smell of damp paper sweetened into something old and an iron rich. On 10, the exit sign sputtered once, a last tiny gasp of stored charge, and in that breath of red light I saw a shadow where no human could fit, elbows too wide, head too narrow, clinging above the doorway like a patient insect. I reached 15. The microfilm went dark. I stood blind inside the stacks while rain began again, louder until it drowned every other thought but one. Do not look. When the power finally returned, nothing clung above the door. But all the fallen books had opened themselves to the same page. The photo of the library's mezzanine. In each copy, the penciled circle had moved, no longer around the old window. Now each circle rested above the door. I reshelved them with shaking hands and left the library lights on for a week.